Diary, the 24th of September, 1941. The decisive battle has not been fought yet. Those at the top have been greatly mistaken about Russia. We can only hope that the forthcoming events will push things forward so that we can consider Russia as effectively eliminated. Yet even in this case, there is no reason to get our hopes up for a change in the domestic situation in Russia, and therefore for its dropping out of the war. England has certainly recovered during this summer. America is impatient to enter the war. The final decision of the war is yet to come. That means it will take a long time. Letter to his wife, the 24th of September, 1941. We have moved 250 kilometers north, but have still not arrived in our new section. There are no more sunflower and tobacco fields, only potatoes. The region we are approaching is said to have been the best for wolves throughout the entire European part of Russia. That means it will be again a terrain with forests and swamps involving all consequential difficulties and nasty problems. Since large parts of the Russian Army Group South have been annihilated, thanks not to Reichenau's, but to our own army, and fortunately in particular to my corps, the forthcoming events will be essential for the overall development in the east. The more successful the better, since in that case the Russian will not be able to recover until next spring. No one who got to know Russia wants to fight next year as we did this year. Every German who encountered Bolshevism here is sick of it. The war is still pending. If America enters, which has basically already happened, a new enemy will emerge who can support England at least with its Air Force and Navy. Diary, the 25th of September, 1941. Flew to the army at Klintsy with the Storch, 50 minutes flight, over an armoured train, which has been completely destroyed by our Luftwaffe. Klintsy is a completely preserved city of 40,000, the first undestroyed one we have seen since the German border. How amazing is that? Old wooden churches with artistic icons and a market with stalls in front of it. The city folk are happy and grateful that they can use their church again. Unfortunately, we do not know how to use this advantage by assisting them in repairing the churches. Diary, the 27th of September, 1941. Anyhow, our concentration of troops was not disguised at all, not even slightly. Intercepted radio messages from the Russians asking for reinforcement in light of an imminent German attack give a broad hint that they are not blind. But because we are pressed for time, we do not bother about that. Our divisions arrive at the last moment, so to speak, with their tongues hanging out from the southwest. The operation should and indeed must start as early as possible, because winter is just around the corner. Still, it would have been possible to disguise the advance by little detours. Because it is not my division, I have no say in that. There is speculation as to whether the Russian army group Timoshenko will answer or evade the attack. The overall situation would require that of them. Since we have torn a big hole in their lines at Kiev, Timoshenko cannot stay without jeopardizing their left wing. On the other hand, evading would mean abandoning the area around Moscow and the war industry located there. Now, this, as well as Kharkov and the Donetsk basin, are at risk. War report to his family, the 29th of September, 1941. In the meanwhile, it has started to freeze every night. Even during the daytime, we have rarely more than about 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. A permanently grey sky lies over the country, and a cold wind blows across the fields. People with a good knowledge of the weather insist it will stay like that until late October, then it will rain until mid-November, then the rivers will freeze and thaw at the end of April. Nice prospects. You at home cannot possibly imagine what it means to live outside day and night, as the infantry have to do, and yet they all wear summer instead of winter clothes. The Panjis already wear their sheepskins. They are of a very strange cut, a tight-fitting waistline with a bell-shaped pleated lower part made out of sheepskin which is worn inside out. The women cover their heads with thick shawls. They all look as if they have toothache. They wear flannel or felt wrapped around their calves and shoes. To be honest, they look a bit like Eskimos. All of this is called Great Russia. That is where we are. There are vast forests in front of us. Wolves are said to be living in there. Rumour has it that a man has already been bitten by a rabid wolf bitch. All that is possible here, not just lice and bugs. We no longer even mention them. We have not witnessed any poorer villages than these ones. Low and narrow, they are nestled in hollows. They are built out of beams, even on the inside. One feels like a trapper in the Wild West. Oven and hob is the same thing, with a big fire hole in the middle where the burning logs of wood are. There is no coal. People use wood as fuel. The oven is so big that it extends far into the room. Because it is located at the longitudinal wall, it divides the room into two smaller chambers. There are wooden pallets as beds. A second sleeping place is on top of the oven, which is about 1.5 meters high. This seems to be the place of honor. I guess we will also sit there if the temperature falls below -30 degrees Celsius. Letter to his wife, the 29th of September, 1941. We are on the brink of the decisive battle in Russia. We can be optimistic that it will be again a great success. It is not yet certain that it will reach the same proportion as the Battle of Kiev. However, the further development of the overall situation in the east relies on our imminent achievements. The situation in Kiev is said to be quite unpleasant because the Russians have hidden a great amount of mines and incendiary devices, which cause lots of detonations. The kind of warfare we witness here has nothing to do with a decent battle. Diary, the 1st of October, 1941. In an excellent decree, the Führer points out the weight of this decisive battle. Whether our approach meets these expectations in general remains to be seen. We think that it is too shallow and will therefore not result in the desired encirclement of the majority of the enemy. Yet it would be really bad if the Russian were able to get away in large numbers. Then he would still have enough resources to rebuild his army during the winter. Letter to his family, the 8th of October, 1941. Back in school again, sitting at a school desk, writing. Outside we have the first snow. The cold autumn wind tears the leaves from the trees around the destroyed church on the opposite side. It is surrounded by the ruins of the smashed tomb of a family who used to be the benefactors of the village. It was probably destroyed 23 years ago during the revolution. Nobody cared to remove them. The villa owned by this rich manufacturer family was turned into a party house. Today, only the chimneys are left. On the opposite side, the ruins of the factory that was burnt down by partisans before the Germans approached are still smoking. A shed filled with firewood also contains the debris of a chopped-up iconostasis, which used to embellish the church. It includes the remains of magnificent ecclesia books and Bibles, bound in leather and velvet. Anything beautiful in this country has been completely destroyed by Bolshevism. The few remaining things will finally be destroyed by this war. On the 2nd of October, we have again taken the enemy by surprise with our attack. We would never have thought that this could happen given our openly conducted preparations. The Russian knew neither the time nor the direction of the attack. As a result, entire corps were able to march by without getting into contact with the enemy on the first and second day after the breakthrough through the enemy positions, including my own left-wing division. Nevertheless, the battle is still going on. We have to expect that the surrounded enemy will try to break out of the encirclement with desperate courage. We have already experienced twice what that means. Yet by and large it must be said that the opponent is already beaten and that he will now lose the remaining core of his army, which is supposed to defend Moscow. At the end of the month, he will have neither his capital city nor the famous industrial area of the Donets Basin, and will be left with an extremely weakened army. It will not be easy for the Russian to make good these losses. Yet we cannot assume that the war with him is over. So far every prisoner said, "And even if you throw us back to the Ural Mountains, there will be no peace between you and us." The Bolshevik cannot make peace with the National Socialist. An agreement between them is impossible. It is true we are battered, but not beaten yet. We rely on the greatness of our country and on our huge human resources, and on the assistance of England and America. Therefore, we do not know how far we have to fight our way through this forbidding country. Again, there are forests, swamps, and bad roads everywhere. So far, the weather has been favourable during the first days of the offensive, but if it turns wet, we will face great difficulties. Diary, the 10th of October, 1941. Clear skies in the evening, around -5 degrees Celsius. Have again applied for light winter clothing. Our men are still wearing their summer uniforms. But the army group has categorically decided that ammunition and food supply are more important than clothing. In my view, categorical decisions are mostly wrong. It is always possible to send a few train carriages, which would help a lot. In the current situation, no inferior would dare to violate a categorical decision. Even the field post can no longer be delivered, even though there have been empty carriages on some trains. Letter to his wife, the 16th of October, 1941. Today is our 21st anniversary, and I am here in Sukhinichi, a miserable Russian village southwest of Kaluga. All day long it was snowing, which turned all roads into a black, bottomless swamp. I took the road to Kosyolsk today and could see a long line of sunken, gridlocked and broken lorries, hopelessly stuck. Almost as many dead horses lay in the mud next to the vehicles. We got also stuck today due to the bad roads. We, that is my corps, have started a new encirclement. For the fourth time in the course of this campaign, we have caught up with the withdrawing Russian and cut off his retreat. The enemy army at Bryansk tried to break through where we engaged them. In 4 days of arduous battles involving heavy losses, we have driven them back section after section until we could encircle them completely. 5,000 prisoners and 102 guns were the corps' prey in these early days. We left it to a different corps to finish off the encirclement completely, which did not pose a challenge, and marched northwest. The Russian army is crumbling. Now and then there are clear signs of disintegration. Today I read that London fears a separate peace between Russia and us. I cannot imagine that Hitler will agree to make peace with the Bolsheviks, only with a system friendly to National Socialism. Just now I hear the message that Odessa has fallen. Our frontline division is only 73 kilometers from Moscow. I think there is not anybody among us who does not wish for an end of our war and our stay in Russia. But no one really believes that that will be the case. Everyone would leave this country with the greatest pleasure, since it means only hardships, ugliness, and painstaking efforts. No one can really imagine what every single man here has to endure in this weather, this terrain, the state of the country, and the challenges the war forces on him. Only someone who has experienced this himself can understand what it means to be on watch all night long without warm clothes, for instance without gloves, with wet feet, in the forest without shelter, freezing, without a hot drink, possibly with a hungry stomach. Goodbye for today. I hope we can celebrate our next anniversary at home and in peace. Diary, the 18th of October, 1941. A particular difficulty for us is not having any decent maps. The so-called old Russian ones are so outdated that hardly anything is right. Where it says forest are in fact fields, the roads are always wrong, and half of the villages are missing. Sometimes we can capture maps, and these ones are much, much better than our German 1 to 100,000 scale maps, clear and precise and updated. But at the moment we have not got those, therefore we are half blind. The landscape has changed a lot. After the lowlands, it has become hilly and very lively. It is even more difficult to get up and down on this slippery, muddy surface. Diary, the 19th of October, 1941. It has been raining for the whole day. Supplies cannot get through because every vehicle gets stuck. Even at the general command, bread rations are cut. We have found flour in the city and started to bake bread in the Kolkos bakery. From now on, we are assigned to the Panzer Group Guderian. It is located in Oral. We are not exactly happy about the separation from the Second Army, since with the Panzers we are only a fifth wheel. Under the current circumstances and due to the given distances, we cannot even reach them. The Second Army also regrets us leaving. When I gave notice of our departure over the phone, the Colonel General von Weichs cordially thanked us and mentioned the great victories the Corps has achieved. We are also reluctant to separate from the Second Army because they have always supported us in the best possible way. War report to his family, the 23rd of October, 1941. I am writing in the barracks of Kozelsk. I may as well tell you that much because it will be weeks given the current field post deliveries until the letter will reach you. Since the resistance of the Red Army west and south of Moscow collapsed, Mother Nature has taken over to defend Russia. The temperatures of -3 degrees to -8 degrees and the light snowfall, which started at the end of September, turned into rain a few days ago. Thus, our potential movements are highly restricted, as an example may show. A lorry took 36 hours for a distance of 35 kilometers. Everyone was thrilled that it arrived at all. Most of the convoys are stuck in deep mud, in the swamp, in deeply rutted roads with potholes half a meter deep, flooded with water. The lorries, which are already in quite a state, are now completely broken. Spare parts are impossible to get. Petrol, bread, oats, nothing gets through. The horse carriages are stuck, guns are not getting through. All men, be it infantry or something else, are more pushing than fighting. The roads are covered with dead horses and broken lorries. Again and again the lamentation. It cannot go on any longer. And yet, it has to be done. We have to move on, even though slowly. Panjay carriages, the rescuers of the Great War, are again the vehicles the entire transport relies on. But it is nearly impossible to travel distances of 100 or 120 kilometers to the supply base and back again with Panjay carriages, which means that we are facing almost insoluble problems. Thus, we are quite happy that it has become a bit colder and windier since yesterday. We hope that at least the roads will dry off. It is thanks to Churchill that we have been delayed for 4 weeks by getting involved in the Serbian campaign during the spring. We would already be in Moscow if it had not been for this episode. In contrast to the landscape we have seen so far, the region around Kaluga, where we have just arrived, is extremely hilly with differences in altitude of up to 60 meters. Streams and rivers are still and deeply cut into the ground and are the reason for the steep slope of the roads. The heavy clay soil, partly black, turns into soap when it rains. The inhabitants of the country look like Eskimos. They wear bast shoes, patches of felt wrapped around the legs or felt boots. They cover their bodies with an old-fashioned thick brown sheepskin, which protects against bomb splinters. They have thick shawls wrapped around their heads, showing only eyes and nose. They share the living rooms of their pitiful sheds with pigs and chickens. They sleep on the oven. Bugs and lice populate the living rooms. What a bleak geography! This is what my captain from Württemberg said, and I can only agree with him. These people cannot be judged by our standards. I believe it would be better and more appropriate to approach this country not gradually by foot, as we do, but by ship leaving the home shores, breaking away from everything we are familiar with, and discovering it like a foreign, unknown continent. Time and again I ask our new interpreter, Beutelsbacher, a manufacturer's son from Odessa, currently working as a lecturer in Königsberg, if and why no one in this country has tried to work against the sloppiness and inefficiency, this indifference. I always get the same answer. The Russian is completely passive. He does whatever he is told to do and is, under guidance, an eager and excellent worker. But he does not undertake anything of his own accord, has resigned himself to the most miserable circumstances, and has no aspirations whatsoever to improve them. Rather than taking up his own enterprise and risking hard work and worries, he suffers and starves himself to death. He is content with one pair of shoes for the whole family, which go from foot to foot if he can avoid work. In winter, he only leaves his place on the oven to shovel a footpath from the house to the well through the 1.5-meter deep snow. After that, his zest for action is exhausted, and yet endless resources could be got out of this country. The amount of land which remains fallow, how sparsely populated these endless areas are, the state of the forests, which are neglected, not efficiently cultivated. There is no afforestation at all. Trees are cut down as required. As for the rest, it is left to nature if they grow back again. If one asks again, what is to become of this country in future, given the character of the Russian? Do you think that the Russians will abolish the current political system due to the defeats? One gets the answer. They are incapable of doing that of their own accord. There is nobody who would care to do so. There is nothing else for us to do but to set up a government in the occupied territories. They do not love Bolshevism per se. Too many have lost close relatives due to the system. Everyone lives under the constant pressure of fear of being spied on. Peasants want their land back. Old people are longing for their churches. In Chernigov, I witnessed an old woman who kneeled in front of us and thanked us because she could attend Mass again. All the others think that their economic situation is too bad. Bolshevism has no friends here. But Russia cannot destroy it of its own accord. And even if we set up a government in the occupied territories, what will become of the unoccupied areas? Nobody can answer that. What you get as an answer is just a shrug and the word nichevo, nikto. Nobody knows how things will develop. They probably have their own plans in the Führer's headquarters. I myself do not know what to make of it. During the battle, the Russian displayed a behavior which proved his unpredictability. Sometimes he fought bravely as usual. Sometimes he scattered into the forest and let himself be taken prisoner. I have come across Russian troops of 10 to 20 unarmed men who only wanted to know where to go to be taken prisoners, and who thanked me cheerfully when I told them what the closest city was, Shistra. Others came out of the forest with their hands up to surrender when they saw a German. Once they even started to shoot their own men with a battery we had conquered and turned around. Hundreds of them drive Panjay carriages or lorries on behalf of our divisions. Almost every unit has some Russian soldiers who speak a bit of German and who work as interpreters. The other day, 2 cavalry lieutenants came to us with a cavalry platoon in perfect order, with 2 vehicles and fully armed. They declared that the Russian side was in such a mess. The entire chain of command and all supplies were impaired. They did not have anything to eat for 4 days. Order followed counter-order, so that they did not see the point in going on fighting. Today, a captain on horseback came to us and said that the lack of discipline was so bad that he had rather left this forlorn bunch. That means that they are definitively heading towards a crisis. The huge losses of human resources and material are starting to be felt, and force the Russian to send untrained men to the front with neither soldierly will nor education. Our aeroplanes drop propaganda leaflets with so-called passes, which are very much sought after by Russian soldiers who search for and keep them. They beat each other to get one of these passes, because every one of them hopes they will get to us where they will not be tortured, as their commissars want to persuade them. They wave the leaflets or get them out of their pockets when they are taken prisoners, as evidence that they are only forced soldiers and that they do not want to fight against Germany. But let it be understood, it is not like that everywhere. Besides the tens of thousands of bad Red Army soldiers, there are thousands of good ones, and they offer, even today, tough and fierce resistance and counterattacks like yesterday's, when we faced unpleasant consequences and heavy losses. It is of utmost importance to destroy, if possible, the rest of their troops who still offer resistance before the beginning of winter, in order to prevent a reorganization of the Russian army during the winter months. For the time being, this objective is hindered by strong, still unbeaten units in the northern sector of the Russian front, and also by the strong and well-equipped Far East Army at Vladivostok. I do not know to what extent it is, and will be occupied by the Japanese. Therefore, we are focusing more and more on the near winter months, which we do not look forward to at all. Lucky are those units which might be pulled out and deployed elsewhere. This will certainly not happen to us. Letter to his wife, the 24th of October, 1941. Do not worry about the Christmas presents from Moscow. For the time being, the Russian grimly defends himself. A lot of blood will be shed before we get there, but we definitely will. We might go into this nest of communists or let them all starve and freeze to death, instead of bothering with exhausting street fights. We'll see about that. Diary, the 25th of October, 1941. Everything has stopped due to the wet weather and the roads. Just before we have reached our target, Moscow, we are stuck. Finally, we have a ratio of 4 German against 1 Russian division, and we cannot use it. For days, the motorway to Moscow was completely gridlocked. The 9th and 4th Armies rely on it. Now 2 rear infantry divisions are assigned to regulate the traffic, and yet the Russian only defends the roads. Between them there is not much, but we too can only use the roads for advance. The situation is very unsatisfactory. I told Colonel Blumentritt, my superior, "We are missing the 4 weeks of the Serbian campaign." "Yes," he said, "and on top of that the 3 weeks from July to the first half of August that we lost while our superiors were arguing whether our next target would be Moscow or the industrial area Donetsk. Back then we missed weeks of the best possible weather, because we were ordered an operational rest." It is true, it was during those unpleasant days at Bobruisk, when there was talk that the supreme leadership was indecisive about what to do. The Führer wanted the industry, Brauchitsch Moscow. Then our Battle of Gomel has inevitably paved the way towards the south, and we could not avoid it. But even then we thought that the supreme leadership was still hesitating, and pursued this new direction only half-heartedly and with insufficient means. And we have to suffer the consequences. Since the only focus of Army Group Bock was Moscow, now they have to pay for their mistakes. The weather prevents an easy victory. Letter to his wife, the 27th of October, 1941. We have to give up all hope. All our supplies are stuck in the mud and the deep roads. The lorries have no petrol, the men no bread, the horses no oats. In many cases, the men do not even know where their lorries are stuck. Since better weather is not to be expected, our advance will be very slow. Other units enjoy better road conditions and are only 60 kilometers away from Moscow. They will soon be in front of its gates. At any rate, the weather has unexpectedly put a spoke in our wheel. This might turn out very badly for us. Nobody dares or is able to imagine the road conditions here. There is a thick paste of mud, 30 to 40 centimeters deep, covering the surface of the roads. It looks like a wave of mud in front of the cars and lorries, as long as they are moving before they get stuck. Only a fraction of our freight hold is in fact at our disposal. Under the current circumstances, even more lorries break down. We had already left our good passenger cars 60 kilometers behind when we changed our position yesterday. We always hope for better weather, but usually there are downpours on the third day after 2 days of light drizzle. Diary entry, the 29th of October, 1941. Things are not much different at the Panzer Army. They too have huge difficulties of supply. Depending on the width of the road, the army fights with a head of 6 tanks and 1 company. Everything else stands behind them on the road to Tula, which is partly destroyed and sunk into mud in many places. Guderian hopes that we will be able to open up Tula for him by turning eastwards. But we can hardly move ourselves. My main request is, drop petrol. But the Panzer Army is in no position to promise anything. They too can only hope. Thus, our visit was of limited success. What are the war prospects regarding Russia? Like me, Guderian fears a hibernation often disturbed by Russian troops, and in the next year, a war like the one Japan fights against China. War report to his family, the 30th of October, 1941. Our main opponent is the weather. Despite a few pleasant days, the roads are not drying. Because the lorries cannot get through, we have neither fuel, nor oil, nor bread, nor coffee, etc. And our stock of ammunition is running low. We have enough meat, cabbage, even potatoes, although not too much. We also have corn, while we are running out of oats. By and large, we are stuck with our vehicles, because we cannot use the roads, which is a precondition for our advance. Nature has beaten technology. We were really lucky that this did not already happen in late September, when we were just about to destroy the Russian Center Army Group. But what an irony that this halt happens to us at the very gates of Moscow. The divisions are just 60 kilometers, 3 little days' march, away from the capital. We have already reached out our hands for the stronghold of communism, so to speak. We are vastly superior. Yet 10 days ago, the runner who longs for victory got stuck in mud. To our surprise, we have discovered a silver fox farm close to Lichvin. Our soldiers have already shot 10 of the precious animals without rhyme or reason, since the fur is useless at the moment. We were told again that the vast forests, which we have been crossing since the 2nd of October, are still inhabited by bear, wolf and elk. We have not seen any of them. In winter, wolves and elk are said to leave the forest and come into the Oka Valley. By then, we will not be here anymore, but in Moscow. The other day I talked to a military commander about what is ahead of us. Well, he said, we will probably be hibernating here, many times interrupted by the Russian. And I replied, and next spring we will have a war here like in China. New armies will emerge here and there which we will have to defeat in a special campaign. That's how it will be, he said. Diary entry, the 1st of November 1941. For the second time our aeroplanes have dropped bread. How much help is that? It is like a drop in the ocean. What we need is 1. Supplies being transported by train via Kosyolsk, 2. Catching up with the motorized troops, 3. Petrol. We will not get all of it. We cannot even get a Storch here. We have no connection to the divisions. We are in a fix, helpless. We have never experienced a situation like this. The weather does not change at all. It is warm and wet all the time. We hope for frost, but it is always raining. Then the roads are impassable at once. We've been stuck in this bloody backwater for 8 days. Bugs and lice are our roommates. There is no hope for an improvement of supplies. We live from the land. We bake our own bread. What the men miss most is that they no longer have any drink rations like coffee or tea, and they have to survive on soups. Otherwise, they are not too bad. They just eat everything they find here. But this again is limited. Some items are already running short, for instance, oats. Diary, the 2nd of November, 1941. They have cancelled the Storch again. I was supposed to drive to the 31st Division, which is 120 kilometers away. I was not feeling very well. Thus, someone younger could go this time. I sent Major Knuppel. He took 11 hours. I cannot see why the younger ones always stay at home and send their generals on 12-hour trips. Instead, visited the aid station of the 131st Division in the afternoon, which was a picture of misery. Terrible air, severely wounded soldiers on straw, one man with pneumonia whose leg has to be amputated, many with gas phlegm. Thank God that we have now the serum, which had not been invented in the Great War. Back then, they all had to die. I cheered the men up and thanked them. They all look forward to being home again. Lieutenant Beutelsbacher killed off altogether 12 partisans, some yesterday in Lichvin, some today nearby. You would not think that this small, unremarkable man has this amount of energy. He takes revenge on communism for his father, his mother, his siblings, who all died or were exiled under this regime. He is a merciless avenger. Nevertheless, 2 straying Red Army soldiers killed one of our soldiers at Lichvin. There are people like that everywhere in the forest, together with partisans. From the 3rd of November, the wet weather turned into a cold snap, which allowed the conduct of offensive operations again. They became more extensive after mid-November, but newly formed resistance from the Red Army had to be faced. The 43rd Army Corps, now with the 31st and the 131st Infantry Divisions, was assigned by the 2nd Panzer Army, Guderian, to support the advance of the Panzer formations, 24th Panzer Corps, on Tula from the northwest, and to move forward from the Oka area near Kaluga and Lichvin towards Alexin, and further in order to meet the tanks north of Tula, and to finalize the encirclement of this pivotal area, which is so important for the defense of Moscow. Bad weather and supply conditions, as well as the poor condition of the troops, in addition to violently and once again offensively fighting opponents, hampered and slowed down the German offensive. War report to his family, the 5th of November 1941. 2 days ago, the weather changed. It is getting colder from day to day. Today it is about 5 degrees Celsius below freezing. The swampy roads freeze and turn into bumpy obstacle courses, which are not exactly beneficial for our cars. Yet by and large, our mobility has improved. It was a special event when the first supply train arrived yesterday. In this fine weather, the city of Lichvin appears in a much more favourable light than before. Not ugly at all, it is located on the steep western bank of the river Oka, about 30 to 40 metres above the river. Deep clay gorges separate the city at the sides as if it were a castle. From the marketplace there is a view over the lowland of the Oka, about 4 kilometres wide. The air is extremely clear. The entire country looks brownish. Brown is the dominating colour here, including the Russian uniforms. The area around Lichvin is agriculturally wealthy, because the soil is rich clay. But since the peasants have to give away everything, they are poor regardless. Not far away from the city there are coal pits, which seem to have been developed only recently, and a plant for grenades has been set up here. We have captured masses of blanks and 15,000 litres of petrol and oil there. Alas, the Russian petrol is useless for our vehicles. There are a lot of partisans around here. The Bolshevik government has ordered all party members to remain and fight as partisans. They destroy all supplies. In Lichvin they have burnt leather worth 8 million marks. and attack, unfortunately not without success in some cases. They mostly attack small requisition commandos, which are sent out by the troops to get hold of food. During the day they hide in the forest and in gorges. At night they get food from the villages. Our Russian interpreter has made it his business to fight them vigorously. The people here often denunciate partisans, because they fear the oppression by them. We can only get them with the peasants' help. Our interpreter was able to catch and kill 15 in the last 3 days, among them several women. They are a committed gang. They get shot without revealing their comrades. They know that they will be exterminated without mercy, and yet they say nothing and claim to know nothing. They have actual hamster stashes. In one of them, our men found 150 kilograms of honey the day before yesterday, not to mention clothes, meat and flour supplies. Apart from partisans, there are several Red Army soldiers in the area, who remained here after the battles and who roved around, some armed, some unarmed, many of them supporting the partisans. After the weather has become better and more advantageous for our mobility, we hope to continue our advance on Moscow. The wet period has given the Russian 2 weeks to bring in troops and to improve his situation. Thus, we have to expect significant battles. Letter to his wife, the 6th of November, 1941. Yesterday I went back to the fox farm. Again, soldiers had stolen 6 of the largest foxes. Besides, it is said that Hermann Goering has confiscated all noble furs of animal farms. That means we can kiss goodbye the blue fox for you. Christmas leave ISS a big question mark. It does not look like it at the moment. Transport facilities to Germany are lousy, and secondly, nobody knows how the war situation will develop. For now, there is no end in sight to the fighting, and we are right at a spot where we will be indispensable in the future, because we have to approach Moscow to the southeast. We have probably the most unpleasant tasks ahead of us. Diary entry, the 6th of November, 1941. Partisan actions at Lichvin are increasing. On the 6th of November, Beutelsbacher catches 60, among them 40 Red Army soldiers. He convicts and finishes off 20 of them. One young man was hanged in the city centre, or more precisely, he relieved the military policeman from this unpleasant work and did it himself. Balzan watched this incident with interest. This war is getting nastier and nastier. Everybody is impressed by the partisans' steadfastness. They all remain silent, do not reveal anything, and die. Diary entry, the 7th of November, 1941. I tell Beutelsbacher not to hang the partisans closer than 100 meters to my window. Not a pleasant view in the morning. Moy said that Goethe, when he lived in Jena, had a view on a gallows for 3 weeks. Letter to his wife, the 8th of November, 194. Again, there are new combat actions ahead of us, after the last 2 weeks have been rather quiet. The weather stays bad, around 0. There is snow and freezing temperatures at night, fog and rain during the day. The roads are either so slippery that our cars spin like humming tops, or they turn into a deep swamp. At the moment we live in a miserable village. Our quarters are terribly bug-infested. Our men keep asking me, when will this finally end? I can only shrug and answer, I do not know. Others ask when there will be the next leave, but one cannot help smiling. Many men have caught a cold due to the miserable weather, and the itch is getting more and more common due to the lice-ridden environment. For weeks it has been impossible to have a bath. Clothing and boots of the troops are overused and nearly fall apart. The Russians are better dressed than we are, but the main thing is that they will lose the war anyway. Letter to his wife, the 15th of November, 1941. Some rough days are behind us and they are still not over yet. Our new army, led by Guderian, has forced us, despite our objections, into an operation which initially was pretty successful, but tailed off due to the lack of forces and support from our neighbouring units, just as we predicted, and changed to the contrary, making us pay heavy losses. In 4 days we lost 1,000 men, 790 dead or injured, 180 frozen to death. We had temperatures of -20 degrees Celsius for several days, freezing gales stinging like needles. Now it is warm with -8 to -10 degrees, but always windy. To fight in such conditions, to lie on the ground for hours, facing enemy fire, without the possibility to dig oneself in, is almost beyond human endurance. But that's how it is here. My fur clothes have not arrived yet. I was told that they are stuck on the road behind Kaluga. I can only hope that they will arrive sometime in the foreseeable future. For the time being, I wear a couple of layers of woolen cloths. War report to his family, the 19th of November, 1941. -10°, -15°, -19°C. That's the temperatures in which we have to work and fight from the 8th of November. They fluctuate between those figures. The change of temperature is hardly noticeable, but what does make a difference is the wind. Sometimes it is completely windless, sometimes a freezing northerly or northeasterly wind blows, which makes it almost unbearable to be outside. It stings like needles in the face and blows through headgear and gloves. And it was under these very conditions, when it was 20°C below freezing and this wind blew, that our men had to lie on the frozen ground for hours while they were under grenade and machine gun fire for 2 long days, standing out against the light blanket of snow, just like the partridges in France last year. One half of them have got headgear and gloves, and they all wear only our German coats and thin old trousers. Opposite was the Russian in quilted uniforms, coats and trousers, which look like duvets, with round, warm fur ear-flap caps. These were outrageous combat conditions. And then, on top of that, were the difficulties of supply from the beginning of the month, which took now full effect. For 8 to 10 days we had neither tea nor coffee, nor cigarettes and cigars, let alone alcohol, often no bread. Ammunition was running low so that we sometimes did not have enough to shoot. It is almost a miracle that we had only 180 men with frostbite who had to go to the field hospital. The Russian has used the time very well, while we were forced to stand still or could only move at a snail's pace. Whatever troops he could gather, he has positioned around Moscow, while we had almost no enemy before us at all at the end of October, and if he did show up, he retreated. We faced a not yet fortified but occupied position on the 10th of November. Against our advice and will, we were ordered to engage with the enemy, although we did not have any neighbours on the left or the right, and those who were beyond these gaps were not prepared to support us. Since conducting an attack across a snowy terrain is extremely difficult and involves heavy losses, we broke into the position at night. The Russian was in the villages. He had left the hills due to the freezing cold. That way we forged ahead, sometimes without meeting any resistance, for up to 15 kilometres in one go. Yet in the villages, the enemy defended himself surprisingly vigorously. We were engaged in tough, close combat. In some places it was midday when they were over. Once we had broken through in the centre, there was no enemy before us, and we would have been able to march on without a further shot. But then the Russian attacked our flanks, and since there was no one to give us cover, no one far or wide to join our operation, we could not use our victory. After 5 days and with violent effort, we could ward off the counter-attack in our wide bridgehead-like position. We have taken 2,000 prisoners, guns, 6 tanks and masses of other material. But the great victory we had gained was in vain in terms of its operational effect. We ourselves lost 800 heads. Given current force levels, these losses are hardly affordable. As here, the Russian defends the crucially important area around Moscow everywhere, with counterattacks here and there by strong units and tanks. On the other hand, we have gained a breakthrough in some places. One of them fortunately jeopardizes Moscow's water supply. Yet overall we are too far away from the city at the moment, so that its fall cannot be expected soon. The advance on the city will be at the cost of heavy battles, because the enemy is reinforcing his troops all the time. The first divisions of the Russian Far East Army have arrived here now. I do not know if the Russians assume that the Japanese will not get involved in the war after all, or if they have substituted these troops with new units during the last months. They had plenty of time to do so. Now we can only hope that we will not have lots of snow. If that does happen, our difficulties will grow immensely, particularly for our vaunted motorized troops. They have the same difficulties in terms of supplies and mobility. Only the infantry and the Panjay carriages are able to move here. Our quarters are in a small village. They are modest and overcrowded, next to a completely destroyed church with a dead frozen horse lying in there. There are masses of well-fed grey mice in the fields, scurrying from hole to hole. Often we have steel blue skies and cold sunshine, often beautiful rime. We often enjoy peculiar and particularly colourful sunsets. But the most beautiful thing is the starry sky above us, in all its undreamt and pure beauty. The stars flicker and twinkle like brilliants on black velvet. This dry cold is per se a healthy climate when wrapped up warm enough. Compared with Germany in November, this weather is to recommend. November in Moscow, that is glorious sun, snow, calm cold. Good place for ice skating and sledging. Skiing conditions are improving. Not many conveniences, but low prices. Sauna in every village. Bugs, lice, mice and rats in every house without fail. Blood type 0 preferred by bugs. There are huge forests very close by. A stream of Red Army soldiers, who have remained behind in the wake of the Battle of Vyazma and Bryansk, continuously rush across them towards Tula to get back to their front. In small groups of 3 to 5 men, they walk along the train tracks, avoiding the main roads. Usually they evade when we find them and fight only in self-defense. A division commander with 400 men, Mr. Alexandrov, passed our quarters at a distance of only 2 kilometers, and not one of us noticed them in time. Very often these Red Army soldiers wear ragged peasants' clothes, sometimes with their uniforms underneath. They have grown beards because they have learned that the Germans do not touch the elderly. Sewn in their furs, especially their hats and their quilted trousers, they keep slips of paper with signs used by criminals, which no one can decipher. Apart from them, there are partisans up to mischief. Time and again they attack single cars or people whom they usually kill. They blow up rail tracks and cut telephone cables. We can only get these partisans with the help of the Russian people living here. They are happy to share information because they themselves are terrorized and robbed of their food by these brigands, etc. We are constantly fighting against this pest, but it is difficult to finish it because the terrain is too endlessly vast, the forest too huge, and the hiding places too many. Our interpreter, Lieutenant Beutelsbacher, who is himself from Odessa in the Ukraine, whose father was killed and his brother liquidated by the Bolsheviks, whose mother and sisters were sent to Siberia and made forced labourers in road construction works, fights vigorously against these partisans. Time and again he sets out together with some military police officers and supported by 3 devoted Red Army soldiers, sons of peasants. He never comes back without having shot dead or hanged several brigands. Almost always these people endure death with stoicism. They do not reveal any names and never testify. They only answer when they are found guilty after having been grilled for hours. I did it by command. An 18-year-old guy, who identified himself as the leader of the partisan cavalry unit, tied the knot himself and cried, "I die for communism," and jumped into it. My orderly, who went to see the execution in the marketplace, said, "He sought death. Such fanatical fighters for communism are legion. Time and again one can see them hanging in the villages, but even more are still around." When I ordered them to bury those partisans hanged within sight of our prospective quarters, because the sight is, although common, not pleasant in front of our windows, the village people pulled off the hanged person's boots and furs and pulled the dead with strings to their graves. That's how it looks here. It is like the 30 Years' War, the same habits and customs. Only those who have power have any rights. I have been involved in war for 6.5 years, but I have never experienced anything like this. Our supply transports are still very poor. Under normal circumstances, there is a train for the Corps every second day. We have had 2 within 4 weeks. That means that we have to live entirely from the land. That has been possible until now in regard to meat and flour, even though the men had to bake their own bread. There are no vegetables and fruit except for white cabbage, which is now frozen. Potatoes are already getting short. Sometimes they are stuck in the frozen soil. Soon the region where we are stationed will be completely emptied. When the situation worsened the other day, I arranged for the division to be supplied by aeroplanes which dropped boxes of food by parachute. In this situation we got hold of a newspaper, even though an old one, in which a war correspondent wrote, "The advance is going so swiftly that headquarters cannot follow the troops. Supply transports go like clockwork regardless." Our clock seems to have broken weeks ago, though. Letter to his wife, the 19th of November, 1941. The day before yesterday, the fur clothing arrived, also padded gloves from the Army Clothing Office. The one scarf was among the clothes. I am amply equipped with everything. Please do not send any more warm clothing, except woolen underpants and 2 or 3 woolen socks. You should have the woolen underpants. You have probably just forgotten to put them in the parcel. Buy the socks. I attach my clothing ration card. Do not waste it. You never know if we may need it sometime. Maybe to buy lining material for the French suits in case I do get leave. Yet I am quite sceptical about that. For the time being, no one really knows if the war goes on or if there will be a break. I doubt that we will reach Moscow this winter. If it starts snowing, and it does look like it tonight, then we will be stuck here. If the fighting goes on, leave will be impossible. Then there will not be a break before December, and then we will be busy preparing the next positional warfare. It is another question how to get home in this wintry weather. Aeroplane blizzard, car snowdrifts, train? You can see from the attached report about that. You had better expect a Christmas without me. I am sorry that I cannot say anything else. I wish it could be different. Everyone is sick of this here and would love to go home on leave since there is no end in sight. It will be going on, even for next year. Russia is crumbling, but not yet beaten. I suggest you file my war reports because I would like to keep them in memory of the war. You always got the best copies, and it would be a shame if they got lost after being carried around for weeks in your purse. Diary entry, the 21st of November, 1941. When arriving at Gryaznovo, we witnessed the end of a commissar who tried to escape at the hands of our military police. Not a pleasant sight for our men. Diary entry, the 23rd of November, 1941. After the meeting, a memorial ceremony for our fallen, since it is Totensonntag, the last Sunday before Advent, on which the dead are commemorated. Then a walk to the dead Russian. This is an extraordinary destination for a walk. A dead Russian has been lying there for weeks in the snow, unburied and frozen. I have to ask the village people to bury him. Letter to his wife, the 25th of November, 1941. Colonel General von Kleist's son, a pilot who is relocated to Antwerp after having been here, will take this letter back to Germany. Only pilots and people like them are that lucky. We are not. After we have been waiting and doing more or less nothing since the 15th of November, the fighting has started again. I hope it will be easier than the former battles. But we cannot expect anything else, given the doggedness of the Russians. It is constantly cold, light snowfall since yesterday. Thus it is a bit milder now, but only since tonight. This morning it was again -14 degrees Celsius. I often wear these Russian felt boots. That way at least my feet stay warm. In this respect the boots are excellent. There is nothing else to tell. I am quite busy preparing our offensives. They are difficult to conduct because we have no neighbours to speak of who could support us, and there will be danger from both sides, which is not easy to cope with. War report to his family, the 29th of November, 1941. 3 days of heavy fighting lie behind us. We had the chance to lever out a cornerstone of the Russian defence forces south of Moscow, the position at Alexin. On the first day we had the heaviest battles. On the second, when the outcome was still undecided, our aeroplanes reported a Russian column 15-kilometre long advancing on our flanks. The extremely weakened regiments had to face this advance in the forest, where defending themselves was difficult. It was a moment of utmost tension. Temporarily we stopped the offensive. We were close to going back to our initial position. 2 different aeroplanes reported the same. 1 hour later, these reports proved false. We continued the attack and broke through. Now the entire Russian front at Tula is jeopardized. The Russian fights with utmost doggedness. His artillery has caused us heavy losses in some places. He has surrounded himself with a belt of mines. He has got new ones. They look like a box, some 20 centimetre in length, 5 centimetre in height and in width, made out of thin wood. They only have to be placed in the snow. They have caused a lot of damage. But the worst for the infantry was again to lie on the bare ground for hours, without protection, under enemy fire. The ground is frozen 1 metre deep. Without being able to move, the men had to remain in the same spot for 10 hours. 3 of them just froze to death. Besides, all villages are destroyed. The remaining houses shot to pieces, ruined. Tonight a battalion has to sleep in 4 sheds. The horses have to stay outside. Supplies do not come through. It is beyond belief what the men accomplish here. Diary entry, Gryaznovo, the 30th of November, 1941. Russians and Germans in their winter uniforms are hardly distinguishable. The Germans wear Russian fur hats. Letter to his wife, the 1st of December, 1941. We are in dire straits right now. The enemy vigorously attacks our newly won positions. Our men are extremely exhausted, and we have around -20°C and a freezing wind from the north, which blows the snow like clouds across the ground. The situation is as bad as never before, and we dread the most unpleasant consequences. The situation is especially threatening because our troops are at the end of their tether. Kluge has achieved considerable successes at the North Front at Moscow. South of the city of Tula, and where we are, Guderian tries the same and more, but with insufficient means. We are the ones to suffer. We know only one thing. It cannot go on like this on a permanent basis. The losses are very high. The strain on the men is beyond the power of human endurance. Diary entry, the 4th of December, 1941. Our position in front of the forest, which was ideal during the summer, is terrible in winter because there is no shelter. Positional infantry and artillery are located in the frontline villages with their most necessary vehicles and limbers. Here it is overcrowded everywhere. 30 people are happy to have one room. They cannot lie down, but stand just to be in a warm place. It is impossible to wash. There are lice everywhere. We incessantly scratch and scrape. Many men suffer from bladder and bowel diseases due to the cold floor they have to lie on, and they do not get a good rest because they wake up many times during the night. It is impossible to accommodate the reserves so that they can be ready to step in immediately. One gets used to that, always hoping that if the Russian does break through, he will not penetrate deeply into our lines. In this war, all tactical rules are messed up. Now it is common to fight at a combat width which was previously considered unreasonable. It is common to hold positions covering many kilometers with companies of only 40 men. But all these men at the front line are so stressed and strained due to these conditions that it all draws to a close. There are 3 main complaints I am confronted with. Why did the 2nd Panzer Army order us to attack without being sure that they could come to support us? Now our blood sacrifices, which are hardly bearable given our limited strength, 635 heads of the 131st Division from the 27th of November, including the sick, are in vain. Why do our troops get jam instead of fat, although fat is a necessity in this cold weather? Why do they send us out to fight a winter war with insufficient clothing and to face challenges that are beyond human strength? Does anybody know what's going on here? On 3 December, I went to see Drescher's regiment. The Russian Dogorat was rolling in volley fire. Our own and enemy artillery was banging away. There was one attack after another. The regiment commander welcomed me almost in tears. Yesterday a company ran away. He lined them all up afterwards and asked them, "How can you do such a thing?" Whereupon the men started to cry. "We cannot go on any longer, Colonel." The rest of his regiment is melting away. Drescher says if he loses these remaining men, he will not be able to build up the regiment. Companies of just 19 or 20 men, it is impossible to fight with. And the Russian throws in more and more people. And again the plea, the request, the cry for sufficient food supplies, first and foremost fat, for appropriate clothing, and even more for replacements to fill up our lines. Colonel Drescher says, "Our men are in such a state that I cannot rule out that one person might point his gun against his own officer, because he is truly desperate and loses his head." 3 cases of self-mutilation happened during the last days, all involving men with impeccable records. At midday, on 3 December, Colonel General Guderian came accompanied by 2 armoured scout cars in misty weather and driving snow. After a quick lunch, I described the troops' condition. The 131st Division extremely exhausted, not able to attack or to fend off heavy attacks. The 31st Division able to conduct a limited attack. I reported the increasing number of sick people due to a poor, entirely fat-free diet and completely insufficient winter clothing. I described the poor supply and transport situation. Between two armies and without any motorized vehicles because they are all broken, except for the occasional one we have to travel for many days just to get necessary things to our position. Very often we do not get any provisions at all for half a week. We have got used to it now and help ourselves. But the area where we have been deployed for 6 weeks is empty, and there is nothing more to find. I tell him that it cannot go on like this if we do not get at least fat and reasonably useful winter clothing this instant, and proper and regular provisions in future. Because right now we are getting shortened provisions for 2 days, and then nothing for several days. The general replied that he had heard similar things elsewhere. Yet he admitted that our provisions were the worst because no other corps had to fight under supply conditions as bad as ours. Other units also had better clothing than us, because the uniforms we were entitled to were sent to the Second Army, which we left after being assigned to the Panzer Army. But units were depleted everywhere at a catastrophic level, and the fighting morale of the divisions was lowered extremely. Therefore, he flew to the army group and asked for orders, but his request was not met with understanding and approval. He also failed to convince even higher authorities to give the order to cancel the operation. The Commander-in-Chief of the army ordered him to reach a line, which is impossible to hold in the long run. I think Mikhailov-Skopin was mentioned. Finally, Field Marshal von Bock gave the following order: forward without delay and take Tula. Accordingly, he ordered the last attack, which started on the 1st of December by the 24th Panzer Corps. When I picked Guderian up for dinner at 8 p.m., he had just received news about the state of affairs of the 24th Panzer Corps. East of Tula, the advance is going slowly, but it is moving. North of Tula, the 4th Panzer Division with Battle Group Eberbach has reached the main road at Kostrova. The Panzer Division itself is at the railway station at Revyakino. The enemy is pressing them hard from the north. Eberbach has 30 tanks, which is not exactly a powerful force. We must expect that he will be attacked tomorrow as well. Thus, Guderian's first question for me was, could you start your attack already on the 5th instead on the 6th of December? I answered, given the current situation and the latest developments, we have to try to be ready on the 5th of December. Since both regiments know their sections, it might be possible. After having consulted the division, I will set the earliest possible date. It has been getting cold. At 9 p.m. on 4 December, a pilot told us temperatures of minus 30 degrees C are forecast for tomorrow. We did not expect that. None of us was aware of the impact of this weather change. I told my officers not to give this information to the 31st Division, because it would turn the mood down. And that is undesirable, because we cannot do anything about it anyway. The ball is set rolling.